Oh no, what happens on the boat to Rome? That's what we're going to talk about today in Acts 27. Boy, I watched a bunch of videos about this because I was kind of curious about what this really meant. It is really interesting. This is Jill from the Northwoods, going through the Bible one small step at a time. Someone basically went through historically and tried to validate each and every point of the shipwreck. Was it plausible? Or, were the places that they said, were they there? And what they found is this is pretty truthful. So that was really pretty cool. And there's a lot of really great YouTube videos that go through Paul's journey and the shipwreck for sure. I mentioned that there's a good reason traveling season on the Mediterranean and there's a bad season for traveling on the Mediterranean. For it's a sea, it's not an ocean, but it's still treacherous, hard to travel in. And there are places where you can see washed up boats all over the place, shipwrecks. Archaeology is doing all sorts of shipwreck types of things. I remember just reading recently, they found a shipwrecked boat that was Roman, that was probably a trade ship filled with goods. And most of them were in these sealed jars, and most of it was intact, but wrecks all over the place. The Mediterranean, from my summer being there. So I was there in summer, which is the better time of year to be there. Still very treacherous. And in fact, many days we couldn't swim in the Mediterranean because it has a very bad riptide and very harsh waves. So it's a very a treacherous place to travel for sure. So, like I said, boats and everything all over there. We're going to find out what happens to Paul. So they decide that they were going to set sail for Italy. Remember, nobody found Paul guilty of anything. We had Festus, and he's like, meh. And then we had King Agrippa, and he's like, meh. If it hadn't been for the fact that you begged to talk to Caesar, which is already set up, I would have just let you go. But you know what? God told him he's going to Rome, and in Rome, he's going to Rome. So they decide that they're going to set sail for Italy, deliver Paul and some other prisoners to a centurion of the Augustan cohort. So essentially, cohorts were small groups of soldiers. There was a guy named Julius that belonged to the imperial regiment. And so they boarded the ship and they set sail along the coast of Asia, Turkey, baby Asia, Turkey. And they are going to go around to sea and go through all these places, Macedonia, Thessalonica, all these places that, along the way. But they end up at Sidon, which again, so we got Caesarea, and then we got Tyre and Sidon still along the coast, just more north, not that far north. And that would be in modern day Syria. So this is really, really interesting. Do you get the idea that the Romans are so organized? It feels very modern, how they have regiments and note-taking and documents. I mean, it just seems, like I said, very, very regulated. So Julius, it says, treated Paul kindly, gave him leave to go see his friends, be cared for. And so then they set sail for Cyprus. Cyprus is going to be an island. Someone called it a weird island. I don't know why it was so weird, but that's probably for another podcast. But it was great because he knew a lot of people in this area. Remember, Paul went there on these missionary trips. So again, very nice for him to be able to be with people that he knew. And again, the word is used we. Remember, Luke is writing this, so that means Luke was also with Paul. We don't know everything that was done. We know that, first of all, Luke is a witness to all of this. Luke is a doctor. I don't think he's used to these big sea voyages. I don't know that Paul really is either. But the other part of it is that he could act as a scribe to Paul. Paul had vision problems, we believe. And so many people feel that many of his books said by him were actually written down and scribed by Luke and other people. So they set sail to Cyprus, and the winds, it says, were against them. They went into open sea near where Paul was from, and this is going to be Cilicia. And then there's Pamphylia. That's where the pamphlets are from. No. And then they went to Lycia. At one point, Lycia was huge and was like a huge hub of trade and all sorts of things. A lot of Roman soldiers retired to this area. It was huge. And the centurion found a ship in Alexandria sailing for Italy. So they get on board that ship and sailed for a couple of days, it says. So we know about all these locations. We have been there. And Crete, we know about Crete. Crete is Crete. And so they're going along the coast, which has difficulties because it's great not to be in the open sea, but that also means there's a lot of hazards along the way. And it said that it came across a place called Fairhaven. And interestingly enough, Fairhaven, which sounds quite lovely, not lovely at all. It was a place that you didn't want to stay. There were problems in Fairhaven, and it was not good to be there. And someone said that when you go to Fairhaven, there's not much of a life there. There's nothing there. And what I learned, too, is there's no real winter harbor. So this is wintertime, which means that you really can't easily sail a boat into there. And also that means they're probably not getting trade items because if you can't get in, the only way you're getting items to you are those that are crossing over by land. So not a great place to go. So they didn't have much time and it was dangerous. And even Paul said himself that it was too dangerous to leave. If we go out, there's going to be injuries, there's going to be loss of life and cargo. And the centurion said, and paid more attention to the pilot and the owner of the ship than he did Paul. Now, Paul, he probably didn't know that Paul traveled a lot, knew a lot about traveling. We also see that Luke seems to have gained some sea knowledge too, but you trust the pilot, right? That's the owner of the ship. He has everything to lose, vested interest in all this. He's going to be the person you listen to. So they did listen to them instead of Paul. But Paul, he talks to the man upstairs quite frequently, and angels come and talk to him. So I'd probably listen to Paul. But now all this was happening, and it said during the fast, which was going to be the Day of Atonement, you fasted, to make up for your sins. It was right before the Jewish New Year. So again, this is going to be September, October timeframe, late, and too close to the winter storm season. Sailing did not happen this much. It's dangerous. Fairhaven, like I said, not a place you want to stay. So they thought they could go maybe another 50, 60 miles and get to a better place to stay. The winds were blowing gently, and so they weighed anchors close to Crete, close to the shore, and a big storm came. Like nor'easter, in the Midwest we have nor'easters, right? But that kind of storm, just a big storm that comes barreling down straight from the land and into the sea, and the ship got caught in it. And they thought they were anchored, that it even anchored, it couldn't face the wind. It was getting tossed around. So you have a rope and a big heavy thing, and that's supposed to keep the ship sort of in a spot. Somehow they managed to secure the boat. It says hoisting it up. Not going to go through all the sea stuff, but they're worried they're going to run aground. And so it was now getting violently thrown around, and they start beginning to throw the cargo off the ship in hopes of saving everybody's lives. It means all this material that the ship was supposed to bring, that guy's out on, the owner's out on the money for that. And people are going to be mad about it. Your reputation as a ship guy is you delivering cargo. And it says that they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands, and neither sun nor star appeared for many days. Very stormy, days on end. And, it's bad. You can't even see the sky anymore, particularly when you're navigating a lot through the sky. So even more dangerous. And this is where this guy went through and explained the storms and how they all worked in the Mediterranean. And he said, this is plausible. This is what happens this time of year. So then Paul stands up and says, you should have listened to me. Yes. Which is not what anyone wants to hear. And not set sail from Crete. Because now we're going to have all these injuries, all this loss, and all this, material loss that was on the boat. And he says, though, take heart. Nobody's going to die. You're going to lose your ship because the angel of the Lord told me. Don't be afraid. And, so now because of their bad decision, they're going to lose everything except their lives, which lives are good. It says that on the 14th night, they were across the Adriatic Sea, which is not what we consider to be the Adriatic Sea today. It's sort of considered to be central Mediterranean area. And that's not what we think of today for being the Adriatic Sea inside the Mediterranean Sea. And they thought that they were supposed to get near land. These are sailors, and they're looking to get away from the ship because this is really dangerous. They didn't sign up for any of this. They didn't want the storm. So they just lowered the boat into the sea, and as they were trying to anchor it from the bow, Paul tells the centurion, who has been nice to him, and the soldiers, unless these men stay on the ship, we cannot be saved. So the soldiers cut the rope and let the boat go. And so that way, which is kind of a fun trick, people were mentioning, first of all, how good Luke was now saying seafaring terms, because he's mentioning this idea that they cut the ropes for the boat. But also it means that he's now spent a good amount of time in ships and knows a little bit more. But Paul, the prisoner, is being very encouraging, trying to lead people, tell them what they had to do in order to survive. And so they were going to make sure that everything goes well. It gets to dawn. Paul's encouraging them to eat. It's the 14th day. They've been doing this. They hadn't had food. Let's go eat. We need this for our strength. Don't worry. Nobody's going to die. And I have to get to Rome. God told me to go to Rome. We know that. We know God told him to go to Rome. So he is on the right track. So they start to eat, and it encouraged them. A good meal is going to feel good, and it's going to make them feel better. It says that there were 276 people on the ship. And then when they ate enough, it lightened the ship. And so then they were able to throw all the wheat into the sea, which lightened the ship even more. And now it was day. They didn't even recognize the land. They didn't know where the beach was that was running the ship ashore. So they cast the anchors out, left them in the sea, loosened the ropes, and made it to the beach, ran the ship into the ground, which is, what they probably felt they had to do, struck a reef, and the ship was now immovable. The stern was broken up by the surf. And it said that the soldiers were planning to kill the prisoners because it would be worse if the prisoners escaped than if we let them live and still tried to bring them to Rome. Obviously, we're not getting to Rome. Let's just kill them all. But the centurion, wishing to keep Paul safe, and from this whole plot that was being set, again, Paul being threatened to be killed, ordered that those who could swim, they could jump overboard and make for land and rest the planks on the ground. So they were all brought to land to safety. The centurion was giving consideration to protect Paul's life, probably because he was a citizen, but he also had been treated very poorly, but he probably was given very special commands, keep this guy safe. So he's going to talk to the emperor, keep him very safe. He kept Paul safe, which is great. That's good news. He did everything to keep Paul safe. And so Paul reached the land, and it said that this was the fourth storm Paul mentioned in his time. It wasn't the fourth storm in his time period, but this is only one of four storms. And we're going to hear more about this in 2 Corinthians. But anyway, now his life is safe, and that ends Acts 27. I think just the whole interesting point of all of this is we see the chaos of the storm. We've seen this before, right? Storm, the galley sea, all in chaos, and Jesus is calm, either walking across the water calmly or in the boat calmly. But when you know God is with you, it allows you to keep calm in any kind of storm there is. What I'm going to meditate about is this idea that Paul's journey to Rome began under Roman guard. Despite all the warnings of the dangerous sea, they set sail. Paul's advice was ignored, and the ship was caught in a brutal storm. Over this 2 week of darkness and despair, seasoned soldiers and sailors losing all hope, losing all their cargo. But Paul stands firm, sharing this message from the angel that no life will be lost, only the ship. This chapter reads like a survival story. It's more like a drama, right? Luke gives us details about this voyage, showing that God's providence, that means his control over situation, exists even in chaos. Paul's faith is calm. The leadership didn't believe him, but he stays calm in contrast of all the fear of the crew. His trust is in the Lord, is in Jesus, and that quiets everything that's going on inside. It's better than a lighthouse, right? And what I'm going to pray about is that, when storms rise up in my life, I hope that I can be steady like Paul. I didn't used to be a panicker, but I have to say that I have been more panicky, you know, and that's something I need to work on because obviously there's worse things to be panicky about. But I hope that God teaches me to trust, not only when the seas are calm, but when there's storms, a long night, the stars are hidden, you don't know which way to go. God's the anchor. God is my anchor. God is our anchor. And even when our path is uncertain, and I hope He gives me that courage to speak the truth with grace, even if people dismiss it, and to be able to encourage others, even when maybe Paul was tired or afraid, maybe when I'm tired and afraid too. And let's hold on to that promise that Paul did, remembering that God is present in every storm and always working to our good. And what I'm going to share with others is to think about this, that Paul was a prisoner. He had no power in this situation, and yet he became a leader in crisis. His status did not matter. It didn't matter to him how he acted, what he said. He lived out his faith without having power and status. And where are you in that life? Are you waiting for someone else to lead? Is God maybe asking you to lead, to speak up, to offer other people's hope? We might lose the ship. We might lose our lives. But what we need to let go of is this idea that the storm has more power than God. Is God calling you to release something, to say something that will, first of all, show everyone you fully trust God and that God will bring us safe to the shore? And, we can't have that promise that we know that we will get safe to every shore on this earth, but we will get to a safe shore. I think that that's something to consider is Paul never took into consideration his status. And I think we need to do, and I need to do a little bit better job. All right, everyone, thanks so much. Appreciate you listening and watching. Please remember that you can comment right here. Just say hi. You can just say hi and tell me how you are doing studying the Bible one small step at a time.